What if someone you trust, a nurse for example, could go undetected while committing the unthinkable? Today we're examining the haunting case of Lucy Letby and Kathleen Folbigg, where private notes and emotional turmoil blurred the lines between guilt and innocence. Recently, a viewer asked if I had been following the Lucy Letby case from the beginning, and my answer was yes. This was because I was stunned to learn that a neonatal nurse had gone undetected while allegedly committing multiple murders. For context, I worked in a clinical role with the ambulance service for several years, which involved observing shifts in the local ICU. Although my experience was in an adult ICU, I believe the same principles apply. In my experience, each patient had a dedicated nurse. Nurses kept an eye on each other's patients, and that makes sense because nurses need breaks. They can't monitor a patient continuously for 8 to 12 hours. That's why I was so surprised by this case. If the same principles applied at the Counties of Chester neonatal unit, then how did Lucy Letby commit the number of murders she did? I certainly could understand if this happened in the ward, in an intensive care unit where nurses' gaze are not just fixed on one patient, but also on the patient beside them. If the same protocols were in place at the Counties of Chester neonatal unit, then how did Lucy Letby manage to carry out those alleged murders? That's what caught my attention. Now that we've got that covered, let's move on to today's video, where we are going to compare the handwritten notes of Lucy Letby and Kathleen Folbigg and explore how they might relate to the writings of other serial killers. And you will find the similarities between the two cases of Folbigg and Letby become increasingly apparent. The Kathleen Folbigg story begins in 2003 when she was found guilty of murdering her 4 infant children. However, there are stark similarities between both cases. As you will see, both Folbigg and Letby have maintained their innocence. Both were convicted on circumstantial evidence. There was no direct proof of any alleged murders. In the Folbigg case, the prosecution argued that the probability of 4 children in one family dying of natural causes was extremely low. In the Letby case, it was the statistical analysis of the number of infant deaths and serious incidents occurring on shift when Letby was working compared to other shifts. In the Folbigg case, it was her behaviour and the actions that followed each child's death which were scrutinised, including her alleged lack of grief and quick return to normal activities. In the Letby case, of course, the testimony from colleagues and parents of affected infants were provided as insights into Lucy Letby's behaviour and her potential involvement in the incidents. And some of the witnesses commented on Lucy Letby's unusual interest in sick babies and her presence during critical moments of their lives. In the Folbigg case, medical experts testified that the children's deaths could not easily be explained by natural causes alone, whereas in the Letby case, medical experts analysed the medical records and the affected infants, identifying an unusual pattern of inconsistencies in their conditions and treatment. These inconsistencies raised suspicions about the cause of their deterioration. Back to the Folbigg case, where her personal diaries were presented as evidence in which she expressed feelings of guilt and frustration over the deaths of her children. In the Letby case, a series of handwritten notes found in Lucy Letby's possession contained disturbing and incriminating statements like "I killed them on purpose." But are these truly reflections of guilt, or could they reveal something deeper about the complex psychology behind each case? That's what we're going to explore today. The Folbigg conviction was repeatedly upheld, despite new evidence of potential natural causes being presented for her children's deaths. The evidence eventually led to a 2023 acquittal, but the path was long and complex due to the circumstantial nature of the evidence presented in court. In 2021, a petition signed by 91 Australian and world-renowned scientists and medical practitioners was sent to the Governor-General of New South Wales requesting Folbigg's pardon. This led to a 2022 judicial inquiry where Justice Tom Bathurst found reasonable doubt as to her guilt. He concluded that a rare genetic heart condition could be the potential cause of death of the Folbigg children. He also cited that the original evidence, including medical expert opinions, was insufficient. And finally, Justice Bathurst reinterpreted Folbigg's writings and said they were an expression of despair, not a confession of guilt. In 2023, the New South Wales Court of Criminal Appeal quashed Kathleen Folbigg's convictions for the murder of her 4 children and found her not guilty on all charges on the conclusions drawn by Justice Tom Bathurst. So why does it take so long to overturn a wrongful conviction? Certainty in judicial decision-making is paramount for maintaining public confidence in the legal system, and here's why. Certainty fosters stability in society by ensuring that the legal rules are applied consistently. This enhances public trust, and people are more likely to abide by the law. But public pressure can also influence the outcome of a wrongful conviction. If there's significant public support for a conviction, it can be much more difficult to overturn, even in the face of compelling evidence to support a not guilty verdict. In essence, judges are concerned that if they overturn a conviction, this may erode public trust in the criminal justice system. But research indicates that half of all wrongful convictions stem from false testimony. Additionally, a record number of exonerations in the US in 2018 were due to government misconduct. Other common causes include mistaken eyewitness identifications, flawed forensic evidence, and unreliable jailhouse informants. Now that we've identified some of the common threads in the Letby and Folbigg case, let's take a closer look at how the context of their notes differed. We'll start this analysis off by exploring the diaries of Kathleen Folbigg and then Lucy Letby. Kathleen Folbigg said in one of her diary entries, "I use these diaries as a friend and a confidant. If you're having a discussion with your friend and a confidant, are you expecting that friend and confidant to then go around telling everybody about it? You don't. So I'm not expecting that people are going to be reading my diaries." And in a similar vein, Lucy Letby was advised by professionals to keep a diary to help deal with the extreme stress that she was experiencing. In both cases, Folbigg and Letby wrote in a personal and very private manner. Folbigg used her diaries as a friend and confidant, while Letby kept notes to manage and work through the extreme distress she was experiencing. Moreover, Folbigg's diaries operated as a window into her innermost thoughts, struggles and self-doubt, while Letby's were used as a way of coping with extreme stress. Let's turn to the substantive matter of what was written in the diaries. In the Kathleen Folbigg diary, she said, "I'm ready this time, and I know I will have the help and support this time. When I think I'm going to lose control, like last time, I'll just hand the baby over to someone else, not feel so totally alone. Getting back to my exercise after will help my state of mind, and sleeping whenever possible. I've learnt my lesson this time." And that's exactly what was quoted in the first trial. While Folbigg's diaries offer a glimpse into her struggles and self-doubt, the prosecution clearly saw that the Folbigg diaries offered a glimpse into her internal struggles. They saw the evidence presented in the diaries as a history of emotional instability and potentially linked this to the tragic deaths of her children. Let's turn to the Letby case, where in the first trial, the prosecution repeatedly used 2 phrases attributed to Lucy Letby. These were, "Please help me, I can't do it anymore." Other phrases used throughout the trial included, "No one will ever understand or appreciate what it's like," while another said, "I want somebody to help me, but I can't, so what's the point in asking? Hate my life." Here the prosecution argued that Letby's notes were a form of evidence of emotional instability, similar to the Folbigg case, suggesting that it could have contributed to her alleged actions, and again very similar to the Folbigg case. However, the defence argued that these notes were simply an outlet for the overwhelming workplace stress, not an omission of guilt. Now that we've set the stage with the background on Letby and Folbigg, let's delve deeper into their notes and what insights they might offer, or even more questions that they might raise about their cases. Both written notes reveal a deep sense of personal struggle and emotional turmoil. Folbigg's entries show her determination to handle her emotional challenges better, while Letby's notes are simply a cry for help, expressing frustration, despair, and a sense of helplessness. In both cases, there are elements of personal failure or perceived inadequacy. Folbigg's writings are more about feelings of being out of control in the past and wanting to handle things differently in the future, indicating a sense of self-blame for previous struggles, while Letby's writings include a tone of self-condemnation with repeated phrases like, "I can't do it anymore," and "hate my life," suggesting that she felt overwhelmed and inadequate. Both notes implicitly and explicitly express a desire for help. Importantly, Folbigg mentions that she knows she will have help and support this time, while Letby's notes are filled with despair that requests for help will never come. So if that's the similarities, what are the difference? Well, the context of the notes are clearly different. Kathleen Folbigg's statements of personal reflections on being a mother who fears losing control with her children. She writes what she plans to do differently next time to avoid past mistakes, implying a determination to manage her emotional challenges better in the context of raising a child. Whereas Lucy Letby notes were written in a professional context as a neonatal nurse who was dealing with extreme workplace distress. The language suggests mental and emotional breaking points without any specific mention of children or patients, but rather they tend to be a general cry for emotional relief. Both Folbigg and Letby revealed their personal struggles and emotional distress within the diaries or notes they left. In court, Folbigg's notes were interpreted as evidence of past actions and emotional instability linked to her children's deaths, while Letby's notes were seen as indicators of stress, but without explicit admission of wrongdoing. What do you think? Are these writings a sign of guilt, or are they cries for help in a system that pushed both women to their limits? But I think the real crux of the matter here is how Folbigg and Letby's handwritten notes stack up against other serial killers whose cases are not controversial. Take the case of Canadian nurse Elizabeth Whitler, who was convicted of being one of the country's most prolific serial killers. Whitler's crimes went undetected for almost a decade until she confessed in 2016. Between 2007 and 16, she murdered 8 elderly patients and attempted to kill others by injecting them with insulin while working in long-term care homes. In her diaries, Whitler recorded, "That evening, I got the urge to overdose James. At approximately 7:30 p.m, I decided to overdose him with insulin, hoping he would die." She recalled feeling angry at the man who, she said, had sometimes acted inappropriately. She then goes on to say that throughout the night, after I overdosed him, James called out and said, "I'm sorry, I love you." But critically, Whitler was indifferent to James' plea as he pleaded with her to stop. Following our analysis of Letby and Folbigg, let's now compare and contrast the writings of Whitler with another serial killer, Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer. One entry in his diary was this: "At BE of House of 17th had problem getting in or too much noise factor. The Burnett was the target. I would watch the nearby laundromat for possible victims. C9 hit PJ Brad wash day. Laundromat was a good place to watch victims and dream. Sometimes I have a pair of women's underwear on, and after watching a girl or lady, I think that's relieved myself in the bathroom with masturbation's thoughts." Here, Rader's tone is highly voyeuristic and sadistic, filled with sexual language and explicit references to his fantasies. His short, fragmented sentences reflect the predatory nature of his crimes, and his disjointed descriptions hint at a distorted, self-focused, worldview. In contrast, Whitler's style is straightforward, factual, and provides a clinical account of her actions without much embellishment. Her writing resembles a diary entry that matter-of-factly recounts events without any personal introspection. Instead, Whitler and Radar reflect a detached account of their actions. And this is quite different from Letby and Folbigg's, whose writings reveal internal conflict, self-condemnation, and a yearning for help. But Whitler and Radar's notes, on the other hand, are clinical and detached, lacking any indication of internal turmoil or a desire to curb their violent impulses. Unlike other serial killers, Letby's notes, like Folbigg's, reflect internal struggles and a desire for emotional relief, lacking that calculated detachment typically associated with psychopathic individuals. So while both Letby and Folbigg's notes reflect personal distress, serial killers like Radar and Whitler show a disturbing absence of remorse. And finally, I want to turn to Lucy Letby's written expression of guilt. I don't deserve to live. I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them. I'm a horrible, evil person. While this note seems like a clear confession of guilt, it's important to consider the context and Letby's mental state at the time. She wrote this under immense psychological and emotional distress. She was at the centre of a murder investigation and was suspended from her job, and she was also facing a potential lifetime in prison. I think it's reasonable to assume that anyone finding themselves in such a situation would find it overwhelming and beyond their normal coping abilities. Rather than focusing on the details of her crime, the note delves into self-reflection, beginning with the statement, "I don't deserve to live." This inward reflection is distinct from the deeply ingrained psychopathic ruminations that drove systematic and calculated killings by Radar and Whitler, neither of whom offered any words of regret or introspection. Letby continues and says, "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." To make sense of this, we need to look at the surrounding words. Letby prefaces the statement with, "I don't deserve to live." This signals a deep sense of shame, guilt, and self-loathing. The emotional tone is punitive, as Letby appears to be condemning herself, viewing her actions or failures as unforgivable. This kind of extreme self-judgment may indicate a psychological state where rational self-assessment is overwhelmed by negative emotions. The concluding statement, "I'm a horrible, evil person," reinforces the idea of deep self-hatred and guilt. Using words like horrible and evil to describe oneself points to a psychological state of extreme self-judgment. It suggests that Letby's mind state at the time of writing was dominated by overwhelming shame and possibly a distorted sense of reality. It's not uncommon for someone in severe psychological distress to equate their feelings of failure or inadequacy with moral wrongdoing. The core statement, "I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them," if taken in isolation, could be interpreted as a confession. However, the context of the words surrounding the statement suggests that it might not be a straightforward confession of guilt. And this is likely why the prosecution only ever considered Letby's diaries and notes as circumstantial rather than direct evidence. Rather, the phrase seemed to reflect Letby's internal struggle when she perceived failure or an inability to meet the demands of her job. By saying, "I'm not good enough," suggests that she is expressing feelings of inadequacy and helplessness. The mention of killing on purpose may not be literal, but rather an exaggerated expression of her own perceived failings, and self-blame suggests that Letby's internal world may be one where she magnifies her faults and mistakes, leading to feelings of worthlessness and despair. The entire passage reads as an expression of emotional turmoil rather than a clear and rational confession of guilt. This does not match the cold, calculated language often seen in confessions from those with malicious intent. Prosecuting Letby would have been much more straightforward if her words had been, "I killed them on purpose because I decided to overdose them with insulin, hoping that they would die." Such a statement would have significantly strengthened the case against her. Instead, the tone suggests a psychological crisis where her emotions have coloured her perception of events. From a psychological perspective, Letby's feelings of failure may reflect coping mechanisms like projection and acting out as a way to manage intense stress. However, these strategies can distort reality and reduce anxiety and potentially influencing her emotional state. From a legal perspective, statements made under significant emotional duress are often unreliable and should not be read to infer guilt. The context indicates potential psychological vulnerability, which raises questions about her state of mind at the time of writing these notes. Letby's emotionally charged language may not meet the standard of a clear admission of guilt in court, especially if there's reason to believe that the statement was influenced by psychological distress. After hearing all this, do you think personal diaries should be used as evidence in court? Or is this a slippery slope? The Letby and Folbigg cases highlight the complexities of interpreting written expressions of self-blame, guilt and emotional distress in criminal trials. Letby's notes are filled with expressions of personal inadequacy and hopelessness, contrasting starkly with the detached and clinical confessions of known serial killers like Dennis Rader and Elizabeth Whitler. While their writings reflect cold and calculated actions devoid of self-doubt, Letby's words suggest intense self-reflection, even self-condemnation, under immense psychological strain. This distinction underscores a broader issue within the criminal justice system: how to properly interpret personal writings, especially under circumstances where the accused may be grappling with a mental health crisis or overwhelming emotional distress. Ultimately, without concrete evidence of wrongdoing, using such emotionally charged notes as definitive proof of guilt is fraught with risks. Letby's case, like Folbigg, serves as a reminder of the importance of balancing circumstantial evidence with an understanding of the accused's psychological state. As we've seen, judicial systems are slow to overturn convictions, and when it comes to cases involving intense emotional expression, caution is crucial. I want to leave this video with a quote from Blackstone Law, which states, "It's better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffers," highlighting the importance of a fair and thorough examination of the facts. Do you think the legal system strikes the right balance, or are there similar cases like this that raise concerns about fairness of process? If you would like me to cover another case, let me know in the comments section below. And if you want to stay updated on this case, be sure to like and subscribe and share your thoughts below. Your voice matters in these crucial conversations. But for now, take care and I'll see you in the next video.